I'm Cruz Devon, and welcome to This Gay Life. Today's show will be talking to part of the media. It's the Springfield News-Leader, and our guests today are Kate Marymont, the managing editor, and we also have Ron Davis, who's a reporter. And I'd like them to introduce themselves a little bit first. First, Kate, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how long you've been working at the paper?
Okay. I have been at the News-Leader for 6 months as managing editor, but I have some history here before. I'm a native of Willard, born and raised, and started working at the News-Leader first in 1978, and then about six years ago left to chase a career elsewhere. Came back in January.
Okay, and what exactly is a managing editor? Just so that everybody knows.
Right. I run the newsroom daily operations.
Okay. And Ron, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Kate hired me about 7 years ago. And I've
good choice.
Had some radio work before and been at the paper in a number of writing and editing positions.
Okay.
That's about all interesting about me.
As a reporter.
And very recently became the courthouse reporter.
Courthouse reporter.
Yes, yes. As a reporter, what, as far as like what you're covering and stuff like that?
At this point, courts, and I'm really intrigued because we have the Amendment Coalition coming up, and surely that looks like it's going to be a court battle sometime this summer or fall. As well as other things that come up. People call with story ideas and tips, and it's always fun to see what they know.
And see what pans out of it.
Sure.
Oh, that's cool. Okay, well, one of the things I really wanted to discuss is what the deciding process is. I mean, a lot of people, they read the newspaper every day, but they haven't the foggiest idea of really how it works. So if you can kind of give us a simplified view of how the stories come into the News-Leader and how they're chosen, and also explain a little bit about the difference between the paper and the editorial board.
Okay. Starting at the top, how do we get stories? We have lots of sources. We get news releases, we get telephone calls, there are public events that are scheduled, city council meetings, county commission meetings. There are many sources that we draw on. One problem we sometimes have is that we don't know that something's going on, so we also rely on the public to call us and tell us when things are going on. We take all of those different sources, and then we send them through a series of filters to determine whether they're news or not. The reporters on their beats serve as one filter, because Ron is going to see many things at the courthouse in the course of a day. He can't report on all of them, so he filters and decides what he considers newsworthy. He comes back into the office and it goes through another review process with editors. He and his editor will sit down and review what they think is newsworthy. And then it goes before a committee. We have a group of newsroom editors who meet twice a day to decide what we're going to put in the next day's newspaper. So there's a lot of discussion, a lot of group thought that goes into planning each day's newspaper.
When you're steering the paper, is there like a formula of what you put in and what you don't put in? I mean, because I know lately there's been a lot of push for diversity and covering the diverse part of Springfield.
We give a lot of thought to reflecting our community. That doesn't mean that we have a quota system. We don't say that 52% of the population is female, so 52% of the stories have to quote women's sources. We're not that precise, but we do try to keep the community's makeup in the back of our minds as we're planning what to cover and how to present it. So, yeah, we have some guidelines.
Okay. On the editorial board, what is the function of the editorial board versus the actual putting together of the paper? Because I think a lot of people may feel that the editorial board guides the paper.
Right. Yes, that is a common perception, I think, in the public, and it's a misperception. There are two very distinct elements of the newspaper. There are the news columns, in which we try very hard to present unbiased, straightforward accounts of what's going on in our community. And then there's the editorial page, where the editorial board arrives at positions and states their positions on issues. And the two are very separate. Our editorial positions don't influence how we cover the news. Human nature, of course, is for there to be some blending, some overlap, and knowing that we try to combat it. We try to make sure that our news pages are unbiased and objective, and not influenced by the editorial board's positions on issues.
When you're reporting and coming up with a story and writing stuff down, how do you maintain like a non-biased? I mean,
You know, that's a good point, Cruz, because, and I'm not quite sure I believe any reporter when he or she says, I'm completely unbiased, because of course we're all humans, we all have certain biases. As a courthouse reporter, I'm biased toward the court system. I want to see what's going on, pro and con. The best thing I can do is to hew to those tenets of tell all sides. You know, I would never go to the courthouse, hear from a prosecutor, this is what happened, and take that verbatim without checking to see what actually happened through police reports, through a defense attorney, perhaps even the person charged with the crime. And it's just being able to gather all those disparate sources and thinking in the end that you've got something that really approximates fairness. It quotes from as many diverse places as possible and tries to give all sides, not just two sides, because seldom are issues that black and white.
and they're usually very gray.
Sure.
That too is another reason that we send every story through a series of filters, because a reporter may be too close to a story, or may just not have thought of all of the angles. So we send a story through several sets of eyes before it ever gets printed, so that in case we have failed to give one side of a story, we can flesh it out. We have a checks and balances system.
That's good. It seems just recently that there has been, I guess since about, probably about last September, there's been a lot more of presenting gay issues and gay stories, or gay-oriented stories, in the News-Leader. What prompted this? And was there anything in particular? And I know you did a particular story on being gay in the Ozarks.
In some ways, what I recall as a features editor at the time was in 1992, really looking at and deciding to accept and publish a weekly column by Deb Price, who's a Gannett News Service reporter, who works for the Detroit News in Washington. And the decision, at least that I made at that point, was if the column was about overt sexual situations, it was not appropriate for a newspaper. Where I found it appropriate was it discussed everyday life's issues, class reunions, shopping, meeting each other's families. And I thought that was necessary. And since last September, a lot of it has been that there have been events in the news about the issue of homosexuality in the Ozarks and in Missouri that, as a newspaper, we have to cover. And we gladly cover, because it's what people are discussing and something that they may have the chance to vote on by the end of this year.
With the amendment.
Correct.
And that. What kind of coverage do you see coming up on that? I mean, first off, if it does get on the ballot, which we'll know after the 8th of July, I suppose, and if it does get on the ballot, I mean, even if it gets passed, my guess is it's going to stay in the court system long enough to strangle it up for a while.
And it appears at this point that the amendment, which, for any viewers not knowing, coming up this November, would be an amendment that would make it illegal for anyone to claim discrimination based on homosexuality, bisexuality. It looks like the amendment is probably going to be locked up in court, as you mentioned, regardless of the outcome, because of a similar issue in Colorado, similar issues in Oregon, and in 8 to 10 other states this November, I understand.
Well, in your time as being a reporter, have you ever known anything come through the courts like this, or come up for a vote, that was so blatantly against one particular group?
I haven't seen anything in what I've been able to research and find. It is interesting that at this point in time, the Amendment Coalition, the pro-amendment group that is seeking a ban on claims of discrimination based on gays and lesbians, they're claiming that they won't have enough signatures to get it on the ballot this November. Of course, part of that is a political ploy that every organization uses in petition driving to stir up the troops to get the required number of signatures. But there appears to have been nothing that's been focused on such a statewide basis, targeting one specific group of people based on status, based on what the people are.
I mean, if they tried to pass anything like this against like black people or Asians or anything, it would be just laughed right over the state line.
One could argue that, but as well, the people in favor of the amendment are arguing, as has been the argument for quite some time, this is a matter of choice, not of being born black, being born a woman, being born handicapped or other abled. The argument by the Amendment Coalition is gays and lesbians choose to be gay and lesbian, so they deserve no protection whatsoever.
That's interesting. Does that go with heterosexuals too, I guess?
Well, and it's interesting you bring that up, Cruz. The first amendment language that was submitted to the Secretary of State for approval by the Amendment Coalition made it illegal for any claims of discrimination based on any sexual status, which included heterosexuality. They had to withdraw that language and narrow it down further, because if it would have been submitted and approved that way, no one could have claimed discrimination just because they were heterosexual, homosexual, or bisexual.
I didn't know that. I know there's a lot of, it seems like our state has come to like a boiling point, and I know there's going to be like more issues about being gay, and I mean, we just got through with the thing with the Army, and who knows what's next. Does the sentiment in the area seem to be really against these stories? I mean, what happens when you print the stories? Like what happened last September?
Last September, a two-part series that ran Sunday and Monday. I really thought I'd take Monday off. And I didn't, and the only reason I didn't was the phone was ringing steadily from first thing in the morning. And after 34 calls, and I found that some of my coworkers were answering, and the first thing that we would all say out of our mouths after listening to the caller would be, "No, I'm not gay. No, I'm not a homosexual." But 34 consecutive times I picked up the phone and had people asking me, "Pardon me, are you a fag?" And that was the response, visceral, gut level, and it continued for several days after that. Frankly, it surprised me. I write stories about murderers, drug addicts. Nobody has ever said, "Are you a murderer? Are you a drug addict?" And yet the issue of homosexuality is so absolutely sensitive in this region, I believe probably in most households, most people. Nobody can say, "I really don't have a view on the issue of gay rights." That people took it. They could not stand that there was a photo in the newspaper of two women looking at one another in the eyes. That was viewed as, some of the comments were perverted, horrible, not fit for a family newspaper. I don't want my kids seeing that. And these were people who were serious in their comments, and I appreciated it. You've got to know what they're saying.
Yeah, I didn't realize that it was quite that.
And then I'm sure the bosses get calls as well.
Oh, yes, yes. The Deb Price column does generate calls regularly.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Would you get the same? I doubt if you get the same thing on any other column. Say, like if you're talking about black issues or any other racial issue or even religious issues.
Chris Bentley had written a series of stories recently, within the past year, 18 months, about being black in Springfield. The entire idea that in the early 1900s, many blacks felt forced to flee because of the lynchings on the square, and we received some comments. The Zenith series, when Zenith was closing down, we had interviews with people at some of the plants in Mexico, and some of the calls were from people saying, "I left LA to get away from Mexicans. I don't want to see blacks in my newspaper." There are indeed people. We get calls from across the spectrum, and that's not meaning to say most Ozarkers feel that way, but indeed, there are sensitive issues for everyone.
Is it usually?
Newspapers do, I think, inflame passions. People feel strongly that the newspaper is their newspaper, and they feel some ownership of it, and they want it to reflect them. And that covers all aspects. Conservative callers think we're too liberal. Liberal callers think we're too conservative.
Can't win.
Democrats say we're too Republican. We do something to anger most everybody, but that's because we try to present all sides. That's
and you still put a paper out every day.
Right.
That's almost amazing. Well, there's some things coming up as far as like the gay games and Stonewall. The gay games begin on June 18th, and Stonewall starts somewhere around there and ends about the 26th. Are you going to be doing any special?
25 years on Stonewall.
Yeah.
25 years.
25 years.
I'm sure that there will be national stories that will be coming up as well, from sports wires, from Associated Press, Gannett News Service, the New York Times wire service that we receive. So pretty comprehensive glut of information from which to pick and choose.
And if there are local angles, and we learn of those local angles, certainly we'll develop those. That goes back to what I was saying earlier. Sometimes we just don't know.
Yeah.
There may be someone who is now living in the Ozarks who was involved in the situation at Stonewall 25 years ago, but we don't know that. If we learn that, we would love to develop that.
That would be really cool. That'd be a great story. Also, as far as like covering it, maybe this is just a possibility. A lot of people don't know what Stonewall was, and the actual, it was like the first gay uprising to ever really like hit the papers, I guess. They actually fought back against the police. But maybe even just some sort of an educational thing might be good. This is just my own suggestion, of course.
And a good idea.
Anyway.
We'll take that one back with us.
Gee, thanks. What kind of coverage do you foresee coming up on the amendment? I mean, basically, if it does get on the ballot and stuff. Besides, I'm sure that the editorial board will have their comment, which will probably, whichever way it goes, is going to inflame somebody.
Sure.
And on the other hand, the newspaper basically has like an educational process that goes on by telling stories and telling what's going on and stuff. I mean, is there anything in the works yet? Or?
Oh, yes. We are now planning our election coverage through the end of the year. We've been tracking the various amendments. I think there are 8, maybe.
Yeah, they're multiplying
that are being
like crazy,
circulated.
aren't they?
So we've been tracking those. We'll continue to track those through the July 8th deadline. And any of them that get on the ballot, we will explore to find out exactly what they say, what the impact would be, what the public's reaction is. We'll try to track throughout the fall how the public's reaction is going. Yes, any of the amendments that make it onto the ballot we'll be covering heavily.
Good.
And it seems significant that what appears at this point to be the two most controversial amendments, the Amendment Coalition and Hancock 2, both of them having such strong ties to this area, with Paul Summers of the Amendment Coalition running his side's campaign from Springfield, with Mel Hancock being the 7th District rep. So I'm sure readers are going to see a lot about those two issues, and as Kate mentioned, the other amendments coming up between now and November.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it.
It's an exciting year.
Sure it is.
Yes.
What is that Chinese thing? May you have an exciting life.
And this will be an
That's what we're
interesting
having.
time because you're talking about millions of dollars that will be spent on both of those elections, not to mention any other statewide races.
Well, even the aftermath, whether it gets passed or not, I mean, there's a lot of money involved, I mean, for the state. I mean, look what happened to Colorado and their tourism. And if that happens, I mean, Missouri generally has been trying to boost its tourism and show that it's actually something to come see. It kind of seems like it's going to gut itself if it sits there and does something like that.
And once again, if it ever gets on the ballot.
If it ever gets on the ballot. Well, I don't know. I'd like to be very positive and say, oh, there's no chance, but...
It would be interesting to see what a statewide vote on the issue, if the issue were defined clearly. I mean, I think to call it an anti-gay rights amendment, or people who vote against it to be pro-gay rights, is actually kind of disingenuous. I mean, it's a very specific amendment on a very specific issue, and for people to be willing to throw out the baby with the bathwater on either side would be really tragic. I'd hate to see the debate, the public debate, get muffled in those sorts of catchphrases that mark the bias crimes issue, for instance.
Yeah. I kind of noticed that. I was wondering what kind of catchphrases would be coming up on this amendment thing. I mean,
I think clearly, and both sides have spoken generally about the sorts of ad campaigns. You're talking maybe up to $8 million spent on that one race. Obviously, the Amendment Coalition is going to say, we want to keep our state safe from claims of discrimination based on homosexuality, because I think it's valid that many Missourians viscerally find the issue distasteful. That doesn't mean that they'll vote in favor of the amendment. That just means that the issue has to be more narrowly defined and explained, and that's our job, to explain it so people will know what they're voting on, so they don't come back later and say, we just didn't know.
Well, isn't that kind of what happened on the last vote we had in April about, what was it, for zoning?
Mm-hmm.
They picked up the catchphrases and voted on a catchphrase.
And people tend to do that. I think most voters tend to watch the commercials and try to narrowly define it. With Hancock too, the issue is, don't you think everyone should be able to vote on tax increases? It's not that narrowly simple, but campaigns come down to simple phrases.
And if you get a good catchphrase, you can sell soda pop or
Exactly.
or something of a vote. How have you seen the coverage change in the last few years? I mean, it seems that gay issues have, in the last probably 3 years, especially in this area, all of a sudden come to a point that it's very visible. And
I think it's the events.
The events, partly, yes. There have been some things like the bias crimes ordinance that have brought it onto the front burner. But I also think newspapers in general have gone through kind of an evolution. I've been in the business for 16 years, and when I first got into the business of journalism, newspapers by and large took a very hands-off approach to the community. We were encouraged not to take part in PTA meetings or be active in your church because we had to be aloof. We had to be removed from the community. We sat in our ivory tower and decreed what the public was going to be reading or viewing or listening to on radio.
kind of a lonely life.
And I paint it probably bleaker than I should, but over the years I think many of us in the field have recognized that we can't continue that. We're becoming too removed from our viewers and our readers, and we've had to make a conscious effort to find out again what the people out in the Ozarks really want to know about. What are the issues? We've done a lot more outreach. Mm-hmm. Instead of sitting in our offices, we're going out to town hall meetings and inviting people into our newspaper to sit in on the editorial board meetings and to sit in on focus groups. We've made a very conscious effort to find out what the people of our community are doing, what they want to hear about and read about, and then react to that. And one of the things that we've learned is that we have to serve a very diverse group of people. Our readers aren't all middle-aged white men.
Well, Kate had mentioned diversity, and I think the instant public reaction might be, well, racial diversity. But I mean, it goes to socioeconomics. Mm-hmm. You don't want a newsroom, what's been derisively called spinach journalism. We'll tell you what's good for you, and you'll consume this, is really noting that our newsroom is fairly diverse in terms of race, in terms of age, income, population. You know, we have people who are single, who are gay, who are grandparents, and it's managing to capture that diversity in the public, again, without going into quotas. But Springfield, despite what many people might think or like to think, is not all white, all conservative, all heterosexual, and all 40 plus with incomes in certain zip codes. You know, it's a city of 150,000 individuals, and our job is to try to capture the individualism.
As far as diversity and stuff, I mean, I know that you try and cover a lot of different issues, and not being in a quota thing, because you know, you try and cover a lot of the stuff that's going on with Jewish religion as well as other religions, mm-hmm. and as well as conservative and liberal points of view. If somebody had an idea of what they thought needed to be covered or that wasn't being covered, how would they go about contacting the newspaper to say, why don't you do this?
Call us.
Just pick up the phone.
Yes,
Don't be afraid.
we print every day our phone numbers, our fax numbers, and would encourage everybody to call us. I would rather take 8 calls about an issue than none. I don't want people to assume that we know anything. Too often we don't. There may be an event going on, or an issue in a neighborhood, or a scandal in a church, whatever it is. Don't assume that we know. Call us.
As well, I mean, the newspaper is the one place where people can write letters of what they think, and we'll publish them
On
a daily basis.
On the editorial, yeah.
You
Yeah.
bet.
And a lot of those reflect a lot of varying views, speaking of diversity. I mean, good grief. I mean, it's not even into black and white. I mean, that one page, on one of those last issues, it had like 8 different points of view of the exact same thing, and it was wonderful, I thought.
And that again is, it demonstrates our attempt to reflect the community. There are 1,000 opinions on everything, and we try to present as many of them as we can.
That's good. Well, I'd like to thank my guests, Kate Marymont and Ron Davis from the
Pleasure.
News-Leader. It's been really great, and I hope everyone's been a lot more informed about how the News-Leader works, because that's kind of your newspaper. You don't own it per se, but you can write, and if you have something you think needs to be covered, then I think, go ahead, give them a call, write a letter, fax them, or whatever it is, drop it off, and let them know your opinion, and that way it'll better reflect what's going on out there, because they can't be everywhere at once. There's a lot of things going on in our own gay community, and if you need some more information about that, we'll be giving you address and a telephone number here in just a minute. And in the meantime, we're still trying to do some fundraising, so if you'd like to help, make sure you go ahead and give us a call. That number should be coming up real shortly here. And what we really need is some bodies to help us. I mean, if you're interested, even if you only have 2 hours a week that you can help us, we would really appreciate having your volunteers.